Welcome to my shared office in Pembroke College in Oxford. I am the Professor of Armenian Studies. My name is Theo Maarten van Lint. The official title of my professorship is the Calouste Gulbenkian Professorship of Armenian Studies, which was established in 1965 in the University of Oxford and at its Pembroke College. Armenian Studies is a rare field in the United Kingdom. In fact, this is the only professorship in Armenian Studies dedicated to the study of Armenia. How does one become a professor of Armenian Studies, or more generally speaking, how does one get an interest in Armenia? I am a Dutchman. I was born in Delft a long time ago, 1957. I think my interest in Armenia began already at the secondary school, but I didn't realize that. I was listening to my teacher of ancient Greek, who was talking to us about the big retreat of the 10,000 Greek soldiers who had been mercenaries in the Achaemenid Persian Empire, where they had helped someone, or tried to help a usurper to gain the throne of Persia. This was in a check. This did not come about, and they had to retreat in winter through the high mountains of Armenia back to the Black Sea via Trabzon, so that they could Trebizond, as it was Trebizonda, so that they could go back to Greece. This was in the 4th century BCE. Armenia was known as Armenia, the highland of Armenia between the highland of Anatolia and the Iranian plateau. And Xenophon describes how he goes through this land, how people lived, and what they ate and drank, and what they spoke. This was extremely interesting for me, perhaps because my teacher told us, you know, in the 19th century, a lot of these houses were more or less still the same. An area that had, in its agricultural aspect, perhaps not changed all that much over a very, very long time. Then I started to study Russian once I was in university in Leiden in the Netherlands. And I got a deep interest in poetry. I studied the poetry, read the poetry with great pleasure of Osip Mandelstam, who in 1925, after the Russian Revolution, fell silent. He could no longer write because the Russian Revolution, the whole change, the civil war, everything seemed to him to have come to a halt. Then he was sent to Armenia, had a chance to go to Armenia in 1930, and stayed there for 8 months. And that's where he began to write again. And he's written a fantastic piece of prose about Armenia, but also a beautiful cycle of poetry, which I partly carry with me to this day. I always have it with me. And there I got an interest in what he writes about small churches in Armenia that look like little bulls and that stand in the landscape like geometric figures, like crystals. That certainly made an impression. Then I had a chance to go to Russia, in the Soviet Union still, in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg again. I got to know someone who was very interested in Armenian culture, who introduced me to Armenian medieval manuscript illumination, to medieval Armenian architecture beyond Mandelstam's poetry, to music, the liturgy of the church, and to folk music, the poetry of Sayat Nova, who wrote in Armenian, Georgian, and the precursor of what is Azeri today. And I got hooked on it. I found it extremely interesting culture. And then I had a chance to go to Armenia, very briefly, for 3 days out of 10. We went to the Caucasus, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Armenia, with students from Western Europe, I heard Armenian spoken, and I asked people a question. I was studying Russian poetry and asked them whether they like Russian poetry. Well, they said, of course, but we have our own. And by that time, having been introduced in that apartment in St. Petersburg, far away, to Armenian culture, and having heard the Armenian language in the streets, and spoken by people I'd come to know, whose addresses I had, I thought, I need to learn this language. I need to read the poetry in Armenian. Then I had decided to learn Armenian, but how do you do that? It turned out that in Leiden one could study Armenian, but you had to be in the Department of Comparative Linguistics. Luckily, I had the plan from school to study comparative linguistics, that is, to see how languages developed, what relationship they have to one another, and in particular the language group of my own language and of Russian, the Indo-European languages, of which Armenian was one as well. So I had a chance to study Armenian in Leiden, and then I had an even greater chance, perhaps, after I'd learned classical Armenian with Professor Jos Wijtenberg, the only Armenologist in the Netherlands on an academic level. I'm very grateful to him for his teaching. I had a chance to go to Armenia for 9 months to study Armenian, to learn the modern language in Yerevan, and to work in the Institute of Ancient Manuscripts, the Matenadaran. That is the most important depository of Armenian manuscripts in the world. And there I had a chance to work on what would be my dissertation on 14th century poet Constantin Yerzenkatsi, and to get to know the Armenologists working in Armenia itself. I also had a chance to learn to speak Armenian, both as it is spoken in the streets of Yerevan and on the more sophisticated literary level. So this is my journey into Armenian studies, and then you could say, well, then the journey ended. I almost had to give up my hopes of becoming an academic in Armenian studies, then got the offer after 2 postdocs to come to Oxford, which is where I have been working since 2002.